Welcome to the Hope After Child Loss podcast, where we endeavor to offer stories of hope to grieving parents and siblings so that they might rediscover life filled with meaning, purpose, and hope. We invite you to come and join us. Hey guys, I'm your host, Greg Buffkin, and I'm so glad you could join us today. My guest is Ronaldlyn Latham, and she has so graciously agreed to let me call her Ronnie to make things simple.
Right.
So, Ronnie, welcome to the podcast today. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Greg, and I'm so glad to be on your podcast today. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh, absolutely. It's our honor to have you. So before we jump into your story, Ronnie, why don't you take just a couple of minutes and tell our listeners a little bit more about you?
So my name is Ronaldlyn Latham. Finally, everyone calls me Ronnie. I am a mom of a daughter that's 37 and a son that was 34 when I lost him. He's in heaven. I was married to my husband of 32 years, who is also in heaven. I'm a resident of Southern New Jersey and a federal government worker.
Well, you've got quite a reunion awaiting you in heaven, don't you?
Yes, I do. So I terribly miss my son and my husband in the physical, but believe and cannot wait to see them again in the spiritual.
Yeah, it's such a joy to have that hope, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Ronnie, tell us about your son, JaKeith, and about the journey that you've been on now since 2016?
Yes, 2016, December of 2016. So JaKeith Latham was my son. He was my only son. Again, he wanted to rush into the world. I know people talk about long bouts of labor. I literally had him 45 minutes after I got to the hospital. He was in a rush to get here. And of course, he just came out this bouncing baby boy. He could light up a room. He was sort of like a gentle giant. We had names for him like Hammer and Ja. And occasion, my husband hated this nickname, but he was called Fat Boy sometimes. And so he would just give you the shirt off his back. He was very giving, good with his hands, an entrepreneur when he was suddenly taken away from us. And on December the 20th, unfortunately, I received a knock at my door. Two detectives from Newcastle County, Delaware, and two Clayton, New Jersey police officers arrived at my home about 11:30 p.m. to give my family the news that my son had been murdered. December the 20th, 5 days before Christmas. I just, why that time? I don't know. Why that day? I don't know. My son was sadly taken from me. And unfortunately, 2 weeks to the day of losing my son, I lost my husband. He took his last breath on January 3rd of 2017, right after the new year.
Wow, I can't imagine how hard that must have been. And, you and I have talked about it when we were talking prior to recording today. And, there are some parents who do suffer their own death as a result of losing a child, and we know it as broken heart syndrome. People talk about people dying of a broken heart. That term's been kicked around, and we use it, but I don't know that people really understand that is an actual medical phenomenon. I mean, it is a reality. Some parents do die of a broken heart, and not just parents. There are other people who suffer a traumatic loss, and sometimes do die of what is termed the broken heart syndrome.
And I believe that's why my husband isn't here today. He was just brokenhearted. He, the husband is supposed to take care of his family. He's the protector. And to some degree, he felt like he hadn't protected our son. As I stated earlier, my son was an entrepreneur. He bought and sold diabetic strips. It was a cash business. My husband was supposed to go with him that day. And because he wasn't feeling well, he didn't go. And so he felt like had he been there, that would not have happened. However, I'm a believer that God knows things and sees things that we can't. And so I felt like if my husband had gone, there could have possibly been 2 murders, not one. And so for whatever reason, my husband was not supposed to be there that day. And we live in a world where there's evil and there are evil people. And it just so happened that on that day, our son was taken from us. It broke my husband's heart to the point I didn't even realize on January 3rd, he was taking his last breath. I figured they get him to the hospital, everything be okay. But the doctor came in and said his heart stopped and we could not get it to start.
Yeah, I think sometimes, particularly with men, we don't know how to express those really deep, hard emotions. We tend to internalize them, and sometimes we don't even share them with other people. Sometimes not even with our mate, because we don't really know how to verbalize it, because we're not quite as good at even understanding our own emotions as moms are, as women are.
Well, because I think women, we tend to talk about what we're going through. We express it through verbalizing it to friends, to family, to our girlfriends. Men don't tend to verbalize, like you said, key thing, internalize. I do remember my husband saying to me in a conversation, I love him, but you gave birth to him. And I don't think I can be here to see you through this. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. But now it was like he was letting me know, you're going to have to do this by yourself.
Oh, wow. So let's talk a little bit about that, Ronnie. You just lost your son. A lot of times, hopefully, if you're in a good marriage, husband and wife can grieve together. You can share that grief. You don't have to carry it by yourself. When one's weak, the other's strong, and vice versa. And then your husband dies. So where is your support coming from at this point?
My support is coming from my daughter. My support is coming from my sister and my brother and just other family members and friends. I have to say, one of my girlfriends always says, Ronnie, your support system is strong, because 6 years in, I still have people checking in on me. I still have people asking me how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, letting me know they're thinking about me, letting me know they're praying about me. My daughter often says when the show is over, people leave and nobody's checking on you, nobody's calling you. So I have to say my support circle was very strong then, and it remains intact until this day.
Man, you are very blessed to have people that have continued to walk that journey with you. Maybe that is so critical for the healing process, don't you think?
It is. It's very critical that you have people who think about you, who pray for you, who stand in the gap for you when you can't stand in the gap for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's been very helpful. Even my church family, I have to say, have been very supportive. My pastor, Kevin Brown of the Perfecting Church, did my son's funeral and did my husband. And he had never done a funeral for the same family twice.
Wow. Ronnie, let's step back in time just a little bit. A lot of times when parents lose a child, to a sudden death, whether it be from an accident or from suicide or from a drug overdose, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. For you, in the aftermath of losing JaKeith, I know that you had to immediately step into grieving for your husband, but as the days and weeks went by, were you able to get any kind of answers as to what really contributed to JaKeith's death?
So him being an entrepreneur and having cash on him, there was a young man, and I hate to be so nice, but I have to be, who devised a plan to rob my son. And the detectives told me that if it didn't happen that day, it was going to happen because they had already set the plan in motion. And the plan was to rob him because my son carried large sums of cash on him. And I often would say to him, put that cash up. Don't carry so much cash on you. And he's like, Mom, this is part of my business. You know, I have to carry this cash on me. And so they attempted to rob him, brought guns, and it resulted in 2 fatal shots to my son, to his murder.
Oh my! Were those guys arrested, and are they doing time for what they did?
So there were 2 people involved. One person got off. One person got off because they turned him in. But the other person was ultimately arrested because he was the shooter. So the shooter is serving a 38-year sentence.
Okay.
It took detectives, and I have to really say, Greg, that I'm grateful and thankful that this person was found and caught and is serving time. I know that there are a lot of moms, and I must acknowledge them, out there who don't get the closure that I've gotten. There are moms who don't know who murdered their child. There are moms, it's been years, and their child's case is sitting on somebody's desk as a cold case. And even though it took almost 2 years to find the person that murdered my son, I am thankful and grateful for the Newcastle County, Delaware Police Department, Detective Charles Levy, who was adamant about finding out why someone from New Jersey was murdered in the state of Delaware. So I'm thankful to him for not letting this case become a cold case and sit on his desk. But I also want to acknowledge mothers who haven't gotten the closure that I've gotten.
That is so important and so thoughtful to consider them, because you're right. The closure doesn't change anything, but I think it's just the way that we're wired. We crave some answers. We crave some ability to wrap our heads around it, around something that just does not make any sense whatsoever. We're not supposed to lose our children, you know?
Nope. We're not. You never envision losing your child. I attribute it to one of my Mending Hearts Minister sisters who said, we're connected by blood and cells and vessels. And just because they are not here physically, and that physical bond is broken, that spiritual bond and the bond of giving birth to them still remains. So they may not be here in the physical, and but that tie to your child is never severed and never gone.
That is so true. And I think that's why sometimes it's difficult for people on the outside who haven't experienced that kind of traumatic loss. I think they sometimes have a difficult time understanding why that grief journey just never really ends. You do learn how to move through life again, we talked about it when you and I were talking one off earlier, that the acute phase begins to subside a bit over time, but it becomes more of a chronic pain that you carry. It sometimes you're not even conscious of until something triggers it.
Yes. We
and it
talk
can
about triggers in our Mending Hearts ministry because there will be triggers. In the beginning, yes, you have all of this hurt, this pain. And I'll just use myself. I was angry. I was mad. I wanted to hurt somebody as much as I had been hurt. And, I hear a lot of moms say they were mad at God. I was not mad at God. I just asked why and where. Where was God and why did he allow this to happen? With the understanding that there are some things God is going to allow. And we live in a fallen world, and we will experience trial and tribulation in this life. I think for me, I did not understand when the word says that you will experience trial and tribulation, that this could be something that I would experience, because I never imagined ever experiencing losing my son. But I had a grandmother who lost her younger son. And actually, my son was named after him. And so I asked God, why do I have this in common with my grandmother? And I heard a voice so clear say, you're getting what she didn't get. Back in those times, there was no counseling. There was no therapy. There were no supportive friends. You buried your child and you kept it moving.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. It was a very different world in those days.
Yes. Yes.
And we are blessed. I know that my wife and I had the benefit of being able to go to counseling as well, and it made a huge difference for us.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight, and we went to counseling for a few years after we lost Ryan.
Yes. I started counseling, and I'm an advocate for counseling. I started counseling in November of 2017, and most recently, my counselor decided there was something else she wanted to do in life and moved on. And so I ended that relationship February of this year. So 2017 to up to 2023, I was in counseling. So I'm a good advocate for counseling. I'm also an advocate for a wonderful ministry that helped save my life. Mending Hearts Ministry, that was established by Amanda Cordero, because I hadn't even, when I met Amanda and I became involved in Mending Hearts Ministry, I hadn't even gotten to the point of acceptance. I was refusing to even accept that my son was going, or that my husband was going. I just wasn't accepting of it. And when I finally got to the point of acceptance, it was almost like something broke inside of me, because I wore my hurt and my pain and my anger like a blanket. I didn't want to let go of that. I was comfortable there. And at some point I had to realize I can no longer live like that. And then other people were looking at me and seeing how angry I was and how mad and bitter and broken I was. And something had to be done in order to get me to the place where you see me at today, Greg.
And that is a common response to grief. There are different phases, and they don't come in step order. But anger is not an uncommon one, and you were very wise to get connected with a ministry that could help you with that, because you have to get to that point before the healing can actually begin. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and you have to get to a place of acceptance. I think acceptance is key. If you don't get to the place of acceptance, you can't get to the place of healing, because acceptance is key. You have to get to a point where this is out of your control. This is something you didn't ask for. And now, what am I going to do with myself? Because yes, my role was to be mother to my children, wife to my husband. And now I was no longer wife. And now I no longer had my son. So what does that now mean? And where is my life now going to go? And how am I going to live?
Yeah. And that's a tough place to find yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I often say to God, and I know he probably chuckles, I'm like, listen, if you wanted to get my attention, you could have done something else to get my attention. You know? Or I could have taken the pen, because the word says, I know the plans that I have for you. And I'm
Right.
thinking I could have wrote my own plans, and it definitely wouldn't included that.
No, it absolutely would not. We would move heaven and earth if we could to find any other way.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Ronnie, something that I want us to touch on just a little bit, and because you're past this place, I'll ask this question. When you lose a child, we've talked about all the impact physically and emotionally and mentally, and there are a lot of manifestations of that. But another thing that we have to deal with after we lose a child that is, I think it's really not visible on the outside to other people, is that we have to endure an entire year of firsts. You know what I mean by that, of course. The first Christmas, their first birthday, the first Thanksgiving, and the list just goes on and on and on. And sometimes it seems like it's not going to ever end.
Yeah. And I imagine that my son was murdered on December the 20th, 5 days before Christmas.
Yeah.
So I had my first Christmas without my son 5 days later.
Yeah. Wow.
So there are a lot of first birthdays, first holidays that you don't have your child, and it's devastating because for me, our home was the home people always got together for holidays, for cookouts, for birthday celebrations. Just we were the house because my husband was the chef. He was on the grill in the summer, the winter, the spring, and the fall. He was always cooking something. He was always inviting people over. So for me, the most devastating thing was to go from a house that had people coming through on a regular basis to having to sell my dream home that I lived in with my family, move into a new home, and be in here by myself.
Man, I can't imagine. That would be so hard.
Listening to my own thoughts and my own voice by myself.
Yeah. That's a tough place to be for a lot of people who aren't grieving.
Yes.
Just to be alone. But when you're alone and you're in a fresh season of grief times 2, in your case, that is exceptionally above and beyond the call of duty.
Yes. And I now was a widow. I have heard of that word, but never associated to myself. I now was single. I now didn't have my protective covering of my husband and my son. And then unfortunately, a year and a half after I lost them, I lost my dad. So it's like, God, where is my protective covering? Where is my male protective covering? I'm out here by myself. And yes, I have the Lord in a close relationship with him and know that he watches over me and keeps me. But where was my physical protective covering? So I just imagine now I'm a widow. I don't have my son. Then COVID hit in 2020 and I had to be home 24/7 by myself. It was almost like I almost went stir crazy a little bit and had to I implemented exercising and walking just to stay sane, because now before at least I could get out the house, associate with other people at work, and go to dinners and concerts and stuff with friends. But now COVID hit in 2020 and I was by myself with myself 24/7 for months.
Wow, that was truly a perfect storm season for you.
Yes.
And you made it through, and you're sitting here today and we're talking about it. But I bet in the middle of 2020, you wondered if that was ever going to be a reality.
For me, the other thing that people don't understand about grief, Greg, is it is hard to grieve and work.
Yes, it is.
That was a tremendous challenge to grieve and to continue to work. And what I want people to understand is you are not the same person. I was not the same person on December the 20th that I was on December the 19th. On December the 20th, everything in my life changed. And I was no longer who I was. And so you will never be that same person again. You won't think the same. You won't look at things the same. You won't live the same. Everything changes. And God has had to restore me. He had to build me back up because I was broken. And so it's almost like you drop a glass, your favorite mug, and you want to take glue and glue it back together. God had to come in and glue my broken pieces back together to get me to the Ronnie that I am today.
Wow, that's a great analogy, and it is so accurate. And that is something that that absolutely becomes a new reality. It's like your life was, you had a life before that date, and you have a different life after that date.
Yes.
And you're not the same person ever again. And people, I think they want the old Ronnie back. They want the old Greg back. And granted, you don't lose your personality. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
But you do change. You cannot be the same person ever again after experiencing that level of traumatic loss.
And you can't, for me, like I said, even with work, I didn't even know anything about grief brain. And even today, I was just having a conversation with my supervisor today. There's some things that came so easily to me that now I really have to think about. I really have to stop and think. I was an avid reader. I was passionate about my job. All of those things. I lost all of that. I no longer was passionate about the work I did. I no longer was interested in the work I did. I couldn't focus on anything. If I started reading a book, after the first page, I put it down. I couldn't comprehend it. And even now, sometimes I struggle with reading certain things. I got to stop and come back to it. So yes, you are not the person that you were. And it's a struggle to get back to some level. I don't even know if I want to say normalcy, because it is not even normal what you're experiencing or the journey that you're on. But you got to get back, just getting back to some level of who I was was a major struggle.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. And that's, it reminded me, because I've heard this before. I think our daughter struggled with going back to work after she lost her little brother. And, her employer actually said to her at one point, a few weeks after we lost Ryan, he didn't know what to do with her because she was not the same person. They were very close as brother and sister. And with almost a 10-year difference between them, she was almost like a second mom. And so what you said reminds me, there are some employers who are very supportive and who do it right. My employer did it so right. I won't say perfectly because there's no such thing, but they were so incredibly supportive. But not all are.
Right.
And I wish that narrative could change in our culture.
Right. And with you saying that my daughter struggled, and her and my son are 4 years apart. And my daughter was a social worker, and she struggled doing her social work job after the loss of her dad and her brother. And just imagine, I'm grieving the loss of my husband and my son. She's grieving the loss of a dad and a brother, which is totally different. And she stepped away from her social work background, and now is a very successful cosmetologist. But she could no longer listen to other people's problems and grieve the loss of her dad and her brother.
Yeah, that's very real. Let me ask this, because it's been 7 years for you now?
Almost 7 years, 6 for my husband and going on 7 for my son.
Yeah, sounds like a long time to people who haven't been there, but that's not a long time.
No, and I will be very transparent with you, Greg. My son last year would have turned 40 on his 40th birthday. And up until that day, I was good. And on his 40th birthday, I had a major meltdown. It just all of a sudden, so I was on this healing path, but I hit a wall. And that week, I came to the thought I almost wanted to take my own life, and had threatened to do that, because my thought process was, my husband is gone, my son is gone. There's nothing for me to live for. What use am I? My life was on a good path. We lived in a beautiful home, drove nice cars, had money in the bank, and all of that was gone. So what was there for me to live for? My life had no meaning, and I had gotten to the point where I did not want to be here. And
what changed all that for you?
One of the things is, I did not want to have my daughter find me here in the house by myself, and then lose another parent. The other thing is supportive friends and family who was like, we love you, we want you here, we need you here. And so I think it was more of a cry for help than something I thought about doing, contemplated not being here, and was putting a plan in motion not to be here. But as thinking like, wow, how could I do this to my daughter and do this to my brother and my sister and other friends who I know love me? And doing that would be a way of giving up. But yeah, there was a point that I wanted to give up. So I need to be transparent that there are moms who, are thinking, I want to be where my son is. I want to be where my child is, my daughter or my son. Or if they've lost multiple children, they want to be with them. And so have contemplated taking their own lives, or not going for it, or not living anymore. Those are very real feelings. Those are very real things that people think and contemplate.
Yes, they are. I've heard a number of moms use those same words, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So it is very real.
Yeah.
Because it's a place where no mom ever pictures herself being.
I never contemplated suicide in my life, never thought about it. It was never on my radar. And I can say it's probably been on my radar more than I ever wanted it to be in the past.
Sure. Well, we've talked about a number of things as it relates to the impact of grief and what you've been living. And what would you say that you have learned about grief on your journey that you didn't know prior to losing JaKeith and then your husband, that you wish that other people who are maybe listening right now who haven't experienced this, what do you wish it is that you could tell them so that they could better understand this for the other people in their lives?
So what I didn't know is how grief can change a person.
Right.
What I didn't know was how it can affect your health. What I didn't know was that this is something that never goes away. It will always be with you. but there'll be different ways of how it's with you and how it affects you. And what I want other people to know is this is something you can't fix. This is not something that's fixable.
Right.
And so, just being available to be a friend, to listen, or not saying anything at all. I said we laugh about this now, but as moms, we've heard some of the most ridiculous things said to us on a grief journey. And so what I want people to do is think about what it is that they say to a mom or a dad who's lost a child. Things that we've heard, like, oh, you have other children.
Yeah.
They're in a better place, or, you'll see them again. No, I want them here now.
Right.
Or, just a gamut of things that people say, like, oh, it's been 5 years. You still grieving that loss? You still talking about that? You're not over that yet? Or the thing of is, get over it. I really want people to be mindful of what it is that they say to a grieving parent. The other thing is, I'm not minimizing anybody else's grief journey when it comes to your parents or your sibling or your spouse or your grandparents or a great friend or even your pet. But none of those losses can compare to the loss of a child, a body that you've carried inside your body.
Yes. And only a grieving parent understands that.
Yes. And I just want people to know that grief is a process. It's not an overnight answer, solution, or fix. And nobody, even all of the support that I have to this day, I can't be fixed. I was broken, and with the help of friends and family and much prayer, I am where I am today. But this is not an overnight fix, and everyone's grief journey is different.
Quite true.
Their time frame is different. And so there are some people that can bounce back, and there are some people it takes years, and there are some people that will be stuck.
That's very true. And what I'm hearing you say, and you didn't use these exact words, but we could say we're not a project. We're people who have lost a child. So just be kind and compassionate and thoughtful about your words. And please remember, it's not always about the words. One of the greatest gifts that, I think you would agree with this, one of the greatest gifts that you can give a grieving parent is just simply the gift of your presence.
Right.
And, sometimes we don't want to talk. Sometimes we do.
Right.
And if there's something that you want to talk, just look at how we respond. And if we can't, we'll tell you. And I think this is something that I'd like for us to touch on, because I know that it's true because of conversations that we've already had and that I've had with other parents, is when you are talking with a grieving parent, if you haven't lived it yourself, please feel free and please take the risk at the same time of asking about our child. Use their name in the course of your conversation. It's like music to our ears.
Yes, and I think people don't want to say their name. I want to hear my son's name. I want to hear the stories. I love, when I encounter someone who's encountered my son and has something wonderful and amazing to say about him that I didn't even know. I found out some things just visiting a friend a couple months ago about my son. He played cards, that this person really admired my son for who he was and spent a lot of time talking to him. I had no idea. I had no idea that he was part of, he had a motorcycle, but I didn't realize how much he was in the motorcycle world and the friends that he acquired and the people that he rode with and rode with him. Like I want to hear his name. I don't want people to tiptoe and say, oh my God, if I say his name, that's going to trigger something. Yeah, it might trigger something, but that's not on me, not on you. He had a name. He was a person, not a thing. He was a human being. He was my son.
Well said. Well said. Ronnie, you mentioned earlier that you found a lot of comfort and encouragement and support in Mending Hearts Ministry. Am I accurate in saying that you are a part of that ministry now?
Yes, I am. That ministry started by Amanda Cordero, and it was born out of her daughter that was born still, named Aaliyah Faith. And I call Amanda the mother of many nations because our Mending Hearts Ministry group has reached out to moms across the globe in Australia, in Canada, in Florida, in Richmond, Virginia, in Hawaii. So we have an online support group, and I came to be connected to Mending Hearts Ministry because Amanda had created a curriculum, 10 weeks on a Saturday. And as angry as I was and as broken as I was, I continued to come every Saturday. And Amanda laughs about this now. She's like, Ronnie was so angry, and she was like one of our worst participants. But she kept coming back, and I kept showing up because I wanted to heal. I wanted to experience healing. I didn't like the place that I was in.
Yeah, Amanda is an amazing young woman. Interestingly enough, you probably know this, but a few weeks ago, she was a guest on our podcast and shared her story.
Yes.
And it's a pretty amazing story to see what God has done with the trauma that she experienced having lost her own child.
Yes. Yes.
So tell people who are listening today that might want to check out Mending Hearts Ministry how they can either get involved or how they can learn more about you guys. What's the easiest way to go about doing that?
So the easiest way is going through our website, which is mendingheartsministry.org. And on there, you will find our events. You will find members of the team. I'm one of the members of the team, and each of our bios are on there. So there's a little bit about us and about our child loss. There are events that we've held, our conference. We did a conference. So this was the second year of our conference. Anytime you want to participate in our online support groups, you can go there. The dates are there, and it's through Eventbrite that you can participate in those. So everything is on our website.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
And you have some online groups, I believe, that you were talking about. So if somebody wants to get involved in one of those, do they have the ability to join one now, or would they have to wait till?
No. So right now we're on summer break. So
okay.
We're in our online support group once a month on the third Monday of the month. When we resume in September, our online support groups will be twice a month. It'll be the first Monday and the third Monday of the month. And at any given time, any mom can come on and join our online support group. They can listen in, they can participate in conversation, whatever they feel most comfortable with. And one of the things that we say is it's okay. What our theme is, it's okay not to be okay. And so we want moms to know that it's okay not to be okay. And it's funny, I was on Instagram earlier, and that saying was on there, but it added that you have to keep going forward. So it's okay not to be okay, but keep going forward.
Right. And I will say, as we're closing, one of the things that is so encouraging that I've heard from you today, it's been a consistent thread throughout our conversation, is seeing the joy in your life today, or hearing the joy, and because that's what you're sharing. You may not have used that word consistently, but that's what I have heard, is that you're still on your grief journey. You always will be, but you have joy back again. You have purpose again. You have hope again.
Yes.
And you and I know that all of that is found in a relationship with the Lord Jesus.
Yes. I can say today, Greg, that I have a peace that's beyond all understanding. It scares me how at peace I am. But I know that was through prayer. I know that was from crying out. I know that was for other people praying for me and my relationship with the Lord. So yes, I have a peace that I can live in my home and be here by myself, and it's not an issue. I've made my peace with being a widow and being single. I've made my peace with the fact that, yes, my son and husband are not here, but now instead of being mad and bitter and broken, I cherish the 32 years that I had my husband, and I cherish the 34 years that I had my son. I'm thankful to God that he chose me to be JaKeith's mother, and I had that experience. And so I focus now on the good instead of focusing on what I've lost.
Wow, that is so well said. And I am so glad that you are in this place and speaking encouragement to grieving parents who are listening today, that they too can have that hope, and they too can hang on, and you too will have a wholeness again, and you'll experience joy and peace again in your life. Just hang on.
Yeah, you will smile again. I never thought I would smile again. I never thought I would laugh again. And I was always that person that, even when I was feeling bad, I would always tell people, I'm okay, I'm good. But people could see that I wasn't okay and I wasn't good. And it's funny because over the last couple of weeks, people have been saying, Ronnie, you're smiling, you're glowing. Like, what's going on? Like, I got a peace that is beyond all understanding.
Just like Scripture describes it.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Well, Ronnie, it has been such an honor to have you come and share your story today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you entrusting your story of your precious son and your husband to us. And I know that people that are listening are going to be blessed by it and encouraged by it. So thank you.
No, thank you, Greg, because I remember my counselor asking me, would I ever share my story? And it was an emphatic, absolutely not. And I have to say that changed, and I'm happy to share my story because, as I said, my son was a human being. My husband was a loving husband for 32 years. And yeah, if my story can help somebody else say, hey, if she can do it, then I can.
Absolutely. And I think we both would say to anybody listening today, as hard as that might sound, when you have opportunities, share your story. It might be hard at first, but it will get easier.
Right.
And as you do that, it will fuel that healing process. And if you would like to share your story with us, we would be honored to have you as a guest, just like Ronnie has done today. Again, Ronnie, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too. If you find our podcast meaningful, we invite you to follow us so that you can automatically receive the latest episodes. Also, we'd like to invite you to contact us and talk with us about sharing your story on a future episode, because every story is important and matters to God. Please reach out via email at hope@emptychairendeavor.com. That's hope@emptychairendeavor.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening.